All right, let's do this again. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of council for Monday, November 15th, 2021. And we'd like to start with the O Canada, followed by a moment of personal reflection, and then the Deputy Mayor for the month of November, Councillor Garcia, will read the land acknowledgement. Thank you very much.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton bras et porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Councillor Garcia, Deputy Mayor, for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We acknowledge that the land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I greatly appreciate it. Just got a bit of a mayor's report I want to get through, and I just wanted to start by passing on our condolences to the Broly family. Brian Broly, who has been known in our community for a long, long time at ballhockey.com. If you know Brian and know his passion for ball hockey, he is known around Canada for his contributions to ball hockey as a growing sport. He has two facilities here in St. Catharines. He has a facility in Barrie as well. He was the president and CEO of ballhockey.com, and I know countless kids and adults who have played ballhockey.com, and anyone who had an opportunity to experience Brian and his passion for the sport, you would understand that he was doing it because of the love of sport and also the enthusiasm it gave to athletes, young athletes. And so he's going to be missed by a lot of folks, and I just want to say on behalf of the city of St. Catharines to the ball hockey community and to Brian's family that our thoughts are with you, and it's got big shoes to fill. Just want to touch on the GM site, the former GM site, the Ontario Street property, and some of the issues that have risen recently. There has been a couple of fires that have taken place there. We have been working with our fire services team here, Acting Chief Dave Upper, also working with our city staff, the inspections department, and legal. There's a lot of effort being placed on that property to secure it. And in terms of what's happening there currently, In talking to some of the people involved in the property, these are people who are looking to get access to the existing copper that still is there on the property that is going to be part of the demolition as it moves forward. It is a complex site, as we know. It's 100 years as an industrial site, and working with the current mortgage holder has proven to be more beneficial than working with the previous occupant of the property. But I will say that the city continues to address some of the issues through prosecution, and we've seen that here at council through infractions to the building code, fire code, waste bylaw, and remains committed to continuing its efforts within our jurisdiction. People may be frustrated with the length of time it's taking for the city to get action on the site. It is a private property, and we're using every judicial means possible to get action on that property. It would be much different if we had access to the site as a part of an ownership group, but we don't. So therefore, we have to work with the private enterprises that are associated with the property. I will say that our ward councillors, Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco, are very active working on that property. And I just want to say thank you to our staff and to our ward councillors for all the work that they're doing to ensure that that property remains a priority and top of mind. Just like if it was in any other ward, I'm sure those councillors in those wards would be working just as hard as Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco. Sticking in the St. Patrick's ward, the Welland House, as we see on the corner of Ontario and King, in terms of people are asking why isn't that rubble been moved, and city staff is working through the heritage process. The Heritage Committee will be considering the plan for removal because there is heritage components to what is there currently. There's aspects of it that could potentially be saved. And so there had to be a plan submitted to the Heritage Committee. They will be meeting on November 25th. And with the approval of that plan, the removal of the debris on the property can begin. So just want to remind people, because there are people out there who think that we designated it after the fire took place. It was designated a year before the fire took place, and then the owner of the property took us to court to challenge that designation. So I know some people seem to think that we had designated it after the fact. It was well before the fact, but again, due to judicial issues, it did take its while to get through the court system. Got the flu shot today, and so I'm hoping everybody else has an opportunity, if you can, to get the flu shot. Again, it's the best way to defend against the flu and keep everybody healthy, and you can get it through your local pharmacy, you can get it through the doctors. So public health units also have it available. Speaking of the vaccine, also for those who haven't yet got their vaccine for COVID-19, we're seeing an increase in cases. Those who are not vaccinated are at the highest risk for significant infection. What we're seeing in the healthcare system is a large majority of people who are ending up in the ICU are people who haven't been vaccinated. Got to remind people that under the age of 12, we still don't have the approved vaccine. So what we're also trying to do is say to the people who can get the vaccine, get it so you can protect the kids in our community as well. Anybody who's hesitant about it, please reach out to your healthcare practitioner. Get off Google, get off Facebook, actually talk to a medical practitioner who knows what they're talking about. And there's people in our community who have the experience, have the knowledge. Reach out to them to actually get your information. A lot of hesitancy is out there because of misinformation on the internet. If we can just get rid of some of that misinformation by having people who are actually trained to do this in our community talk with them, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, the Art Awards are coming up on Sunday, November 21st, 6 p.m. It's going to be live streamed on YouTube. A lot of artists will be performing, so it's a great way to see our local talent here in our community. I want to thank the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre for stepping up yet again to put on this live streaming event. And there's going to be a lot of artists that we get to celebrate. Congratulations to all the nominees, and looking forward to celebrating the arts in our community. They have been one of the most hardest hit sectors, and it's important for us to support the arts. I will say this, as the holidays do come up in 5 or 6 short weeks, purchasing a work of art or buying tickets to the symphony, buying tickets to Chorus Niagara, putting them under the tree or in the stocking is probably a much better way of supporting the arts in our community than anything else we can do. So think of the arts when you're thinking about your holiday gift giving this year. Also, congratulations to the Trillium Award winners for 2021. In the Meriton Ward was the recipient of the Mayor's Award, and that's Bev Wright and Rick Hesp on 301 Queenston Street. I think it's on the corner of Grantham and Queenston Street. It's an old heritage home, and it is a beautiful landscape property. So if you have an opportunity when you're driving in the area, check it out. It's actually absolutely gorgeous, and Bev and Rick have worked really hard to bring that property to life. So congratulations to them on the Mayor's Award. Also, the Tree of Giving is once again taking place in support of Community Care St. Catharines Thorold, and that'll take place at our city facilities. And if you can bring new unwrapped gifts for children at our different facilities, and also accepting monetary and gift card donations, and they will be arranged with St. Catharines Community Care to be under the, for the kids in our community to experience a beautiful Christmas. Also on Thursday, November 25th, Regional Council will be deciding the next step in the transit engagement for Consolidated Transit. So this will be the first step of the triple majority that will be required. And so this is an opportunity for our regional community to become involved in this conversation. It's about 4 years hence when the planning for this started. So this is the end of a very long process, a process that has been inclusive with a lot of input from different stakeholders. And this is the opportunity for the region to have a voice. So if you're interested, please sign up to delegate, send letters, and speak to your regional councillors about your position on regionalized transit. We also have Winter at the Market, and that's a special evening session every Thursday between now and Christmas from 4 to 8 p.m. Local vendors will be there. And so if you're looking again for some local artisanal gifts for under the tree, that is a great opportunity to do that, 4 to 8 p.m. on Thursdays. Out of the Cold is up and running at Westminster United Church, and this is for people who are struggling through homelessness in our community. Special thanks to Start Me Up Niagara and all the volunteers for this important program. Also a reminder, if you're witnessing an encampment or someone living in the rough, you can call 211 to connect with the Niagara Assertive Street Outreach. And so a lot of people are trying to do what we can to address homelessness in our community. Again, there are some people thinking nothing is being done. I can tell you that there is a tremendous amount being done from community services, from our own staff, led by CIO Oaks, to the agencies that are working with the individuals who are struggling either through addictions, mental health, or whatever other means led to homelessness. It is a significant in our community, and not just in our community, but in communities across the country and indeed across North America. And it's something that if we don't get a handle on soon as communities, it's going to become even more challenging. I was on a call today with the CAO, and one of the drivers of some of the homelessness that we're seeing now is affordability of housing. People are getting kicked out of their housing because of rent evictions, and that's leading to an uptick in people who, for no fault of their own, are ending up homeless because people are purchasing homes and then removing people to get a higher rent. So I know that has to stop as well. So with that, just a couple other things. The holiday tree lighting in support of the Niagara Health Foundation is taking place. They're putting up the lights on City Hall today. So that'll be turning on the lights of Friday, November 19th, and that's 5:30 p.m. Special thanks to Electra, who has offered to match donations to the campaign dollar for dollar up to $10,000. And so this is a great opportunity for the community to virtually participate in the tree lighting. And the week of November 13th to the 19th is Transgender Awareness Week, and Trans Day of Remembrance is November 20th. And that's an opportunity for us to come together and better understand the impacts that our members of our trans community have experienced over the years, and to try and break that phobia and break down the stigma, and also bring more people into the inclusive part of our community and the inclusive circle of our community. So with that, turn it over to the clerk for the agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add one more thing, please, to share with the community that on Saturday, November 27th, we will have the lighting of the Christmas lights in Rio Lane.
You're right, that's good. You're right, that's good.
That very popular. And we weren't able to have it recently because of the pandemic. So this should restore a bit of a sense of normalcy, and the target is to start sometime around 5:30 to 6, but they're beautiful lights the way those people light, so I hope that people will be able to drop by Rio Lane to enjoy the Christmas lights.
Now, you promised snow, right, Deputy Mayor? As part of your Deputy Mayor's position for November, you promised snow for that event.
Definitely.
All right, to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the following items have been placed in Council's Sugar Sink folder this evening. You have a confidential memorandum from the Deputy Clerk regarding a vacancy appointment for the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. You have a confidential memorandum from the Deputy Clerk regarding a vacancy appointment for the LGBTQ2+ Advisory Committee. You have another confidential memorandum from the Manager of Realty and Insurance Services regarding a city sale to Pantera Group Limited, 320 Geneva Street. It's an update to negotiations. Confidential memorandum from the Director of Corporate Support Services regarding the appointment of the acting fire chief. Correspondence from Marianne Murray, municipal class environmental assessment for Regional Road 87 in Port Dalhousie, City of St. Catharines. The following amendments have been made to this evening's agenda. Councillor Dodge has provided a motion regarding the Labyrinth project and would like to suspend the rules this evening to consider the motion later this evening. Clerical amendment to Appendix 1 to Item 6.2, which is your 2022 schedule of meetings. There was an error on the nomination day for the 2022 election. Nomination day is actually August 19th, 2022. Item 6.3, 2022, in the Deputy Mayor's schedule, Councillors Townsend and Dodge have requested to switch months for their rotation as Deputy Mayor in 2022. So the report will be amended accordingly. And that's this evening's changes. Thank you.
Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Sorrento, Councillor Phillips, all in favor? And that is carried. Adoption of the minutes, we have October 18th, October 19th, November 3rd, two of which are budget, and one is the general meeting of council. Any errors or omissions on the minutes? Seeing none, a motion to approve. We have Councillor Kushner and Councillor Miller, all in favor. And that leads me to a comment I forgot. Tonight's agenda is not as large as it sometimes is, and that's because of all the work that the budget committees are doing over the last probably month and a bit. We've had capital budget meetings, we've had operating budget meetings, we've had the ABCs. So just for the public to understand, this is a lot of work being done by staff, so you don't see a lot more staff reports at this time. So I just want to thank the budget chair, Councillor Cisco, the vice chair, Councillor Littleton, for the work that they're doing, because it should facilitate the budget night presentation when it does come up in December. And I would like to remind the public that there is a lot of time to provide input to the budget. Check out the city's website page, go to the budget page, and you'll see all the presentations that have been made to date. And with that, I'll go to any conflicts of interest. We have Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a conflict with correspondence. I apologize.
10.3, Omers.
Yeah, 6.4, correspondence 8, Omers, and Councillor Porter's motion regarding Omers. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a conflict with respect to my employer on 6.4, item number 1, and I forwarded that to the clerk.
Okay, and going over to Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Similar conflict to Councillor Cisco, 6.4, number 1.
Okay, and Councillor Phillips.
Conflict on 6.4.3 in relation to the resolution for the Township of Enniskillen in regards to cannabis resolution.
Okay, any other? Councillor Townsend.
Same conflict as Councillor Williamson and Cisco.
Okay, thank you, folks. Just make sure you put it in writing to the clerk, because that's part of the process. Just a simple email declaring a conflict will be filed accordingly. With that, I'll move to the consent agenda. And before we get into the consent approval, is there anything being lifted last minute? I'm not seeing any. And so I'll go over to the city clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Today's consent agenda, 6.1, Office of the CAO COVID Update, November 15, 2021. 6.2, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the Clerk, 2022 Schedule of Meetings for City Council and Budget Standing Committee. 6.3, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, 2022 Deputy Mayor Schedule. 6.4, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the Clerk, Council Correspondence. Save and accept the items that were for councillors who have declared an interest. And 6.5, Financial Management Services, updated 2022 capital budget and 4-year forecast and asset management status.
All right, need a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda. We have Councillor Littleton, Councillor Dodge.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes?
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried unanimously.
All right, declaration to all presenters. Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, and the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants will be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand that we do this in a way that never undermines any person's abilities or their dignity in our chambers. With that, I move on to discussion reports 9.1, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, 2022 Municipal and School Board Election Voting Method. I'm going to turn it over to the clerk. Bonnie will introduce a new member to the team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, as you're aware, the 2022 election is coming upon us, and I appreciate this opportunity to introduce to you Donna Del Vecchio, the newest member of our clerks team. Donna is an experienced deputy and city clerk, and she has overseen several elections throughout her career. We are very fortunate to have her working with us for this election, and Donna is going to give you the results of the Engage STC survey and staff's assessments of all alternative voting methods. This evening, we are asking Council to make a decision on how the residents of St. Catharines will cast their vote on October 24th, 2022. I will now ask Donna to provide an overview of the report before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Donna Del Vecchio, and I am a Deputy Clerk in the Legal and Clerk Services. My portfolio includes access and privacy, as well as elections. I'm happy to present to you this evening a recommendation on voting methods for the 2022 municipal and school board elections. Next slide, please. The 2022 municipal and school board election will take place on Monday, October 24th, 2022. Staff have been working diligently on planning for all aspects of the election. This includes undertaking a thorough review of all legislative changes, reviewing policies and procedures, researching trends in elections at the regional level and with similar sized municipalities across the province, while also conducting community engagement. Next slide, please. Over the course of the pandemic, staff have been challenged to examine how services are delivered. And with delivery modifications, additional benefits such as greater accessibility and convenience have also been realized. A similar review was undertaken with regard to election processes, as past elections only provided one voting option, that was in-person voting with vote tabulators. On October 4, 2021, a survey was launched using Engage STC, asking participants a variety of questions about their preferred voting method, along with an opportunity to share suggestions for improvements in 2022. Although the response size to the survey was small in comparison to the number of electors, the feedback was similar to the research staff had completed and was taken into account while developing the recommendations before you this evening. That being the continued use of in-person voting with vote tabulators and the offer of vote by mail as an alternative voting method. The full results of the survey is attached as Appendix 1. Although staff are optimistic that COVID-19 protocols may be lifted before the election, staff also need to prepare and plan in the event they are still in place. Next slide, please. Let's briefly examine each alternative voting method. All electors appearing on the voters list receive a voter notification letter explaining how, where, and when to vote. If an elector wanted to vote by mail, they must register to do so in advance using a variety of methods. The elector would be verified with the voters list, identification would be confirmed, and staff would approve the request. The elector is immediately struck off the voters list and cannot change their voting method. A vote by mail kit includes the same ballot that would be used at a poll, instructions for returning the ballot, declaration to be signed by the elector, a secrecy envelope for inserting the marked ballot, and a prepaid envelope for inserting the declaration and ballot. Using the prepaid envelope, the elector puts the package in the mail to be received at City Hall, or they could choose to drop it off at a secured drop box at a municipal facility. All returned kits would be verified upon receipt and the ballot stored in a secure location to be tabulated on election day. Vote by mail most closely resembles an in-person voting experience, is completely auditable, and a manual recount could be undertaken. Vote by mail would be a new alternative method of voting for St. Catharines, but it is well established across Ontario. Notably, for the 2022 election, the City of Hamilton, London, Guelph, and Town of Milton will be using vote by mail as their alternative method, and many of our local area municipalities are also considering the same. In the event of a labor disruption by Canada Post, the City Clerk will establish procedures in consultation with our vendor to ensure that those requesting a vote by mail kit do indeed receive it. Next slide, please. I'm sure you're asking yourself, if I can bank and or shop online or by telephone, why can't I vote? There are many differences in the platform. For example, there is zero secrecy between a bank and its client. Under the Municipal Elections Act, MEA, there cannot be a link between a voter and their ballot. This must always remain secret. With only a digital audit trail, staff cannot with certainty guarantee this. Banks are heavily regulated. There are no regulations or standards developed for online voting. However, work is presently underway by the Standards Council of Canada to bring together technology leaders to inform and assist with the development of a national standard to support the implementation of online voting. The banking industry is also prone to fraud. Staff would certainly not want our online system to be the subject of fraudulent activities. Although some municipalities who have chosen to implement internet and telephone voting have chosen to solely rely upon the vendor for assurance of security, staff are not comfortable with that approach and would require a third-party cybersecurity audit be undertaken if internet voting were to be adopted in the future. By adopting the recommendations contained in the report to increase future budgets in the amount of $50,000 annually beginning in 2023, it will enable staff the ability to undertake this audit while stretching out the costs over an election cycle. A manual audit and recount is also not possible with internet and telephone voting, as it only provides a digital audit and recount capability. This could have an impact with the level of trust the public has in the voting system and the outcome of the election. One would think that internet and telephone voting increases voter turnout, especially among the younger population. Research has shown that this is not necessarily accurate. Rather, voter turnout tends to increase with particular races on a ballot. The opposite may actually occur, and voter turnout may decrease if electors have challenges with access to the platform, they have distrust in the security, and their general comfort level. As indicated in the results of this survey, there is interest in pursuing internet voting, provided that it can be done in a safe and secure manner. However, due to the lack of standards and regulations, the inability to physically audit or conduct a manual recount, staff are not comfortable with recommending the use of internet voting at this time, but will continue to monitor and keep council apprised. Next slide, please. The City of St. Catharines has historically held in-person voting with vote tabulators to record and count votes for several elections. In-person voting with ballots is the most common approach used in municipal elections and the primary method considered in the MEA that fully upholds the principles of the Act and is most common to electors. Vote by mail is the only alternative voting method that fully upholds the principles of the Act. The federal and provincial governments both use vote by mail as their alternative method of voting, and in 2018, over 50 municipalities also use this method. During the pandemic, the City of Toronto, City of Ottawa, City of Welland, and Town of Pelham also offered vote by mail during their by-elections, and it was well received by electors. The popularity of internet voting is expected to rise in future elections. However, at this time, the risks do not outweigh the convenience. This is also supported by several comments provided in the survey. Although internet voting has largely been unchallenged in the legal realm, it could certainly cause a great level of distrust in the election and in government generally. Next slide, please. For many municipal elections, municipalities have struggled with a voters list plagued by inaccuracies. To add some context, in previous elections, thousands of changes to the voters list were required to ensure the data was correct. When implementing an alternative voting method, it is critical that an accurate data set be available, especially with the use of internet and online voting. In the event an elector was omitted or their information was incorrect on the list, the elector would have to contact City Hall to have the corrections made, and current staff capacity cannot handle this volume. However, for the 2026 municipal and school board election, Elections Ontario will be assuming responsibility for the voters list. Consultation with municipalities continues to ensure this change of responsibility provides an improved voters list that can be relied upon. This would effectively position the city to implement internet voting in the future. Next slide, please. While balancing resources, risks, opportunities, and available budget, staff recommend the continued use of optical vote scanning tabulators while implementing vote by mail as an alternative voting method for the 2022 municipal and school board election, and taking the necessary steps to prepare for the potential implementation of internet voting in 2026. Next slide, please. This concludes the presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to the Deputy Clerk for a very thorough presentation. Well done. And do I have a couple questions? Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Welcome to the city. With regards to the online voting, there are, I think it said in the report, 194 municipalities currently using it in Ontario in some form. And there was noted there might be some security risks or perceived security risks. Have those municipalities had security risks or attacks or cyber attacks, anything associated with online voting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To date, they have not. However, some have chosen to be part of a cybersecurity audit, while others rely upon the vendor for assurance of security.
Okay, and just a couple, with regards to the mail-in votes, when would the mail-in ballots be counted? Is that why we're moving to advance, so that they're counted by election day?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the vote by mail ballots, they would be counted starting in the afternoon on election day, and those results would be ready to be released at the time of the close of polls, similar timing to the rest of our actual polls, in-person polls.
Okay, and just with regards to the options of telephone and internet voting, it mentioned if we implemented those, we would reduce the number of advanced polling stations. Is that just strictly a budget measure, or is there any other reason for that?
It's through you, Mr. Mayor. It is partly a budget issue, but also we think there might be a potential that people will access it, the ballots using internet. So there might not be as many people going out to the polls. They could do so online.
Okay, I think I'd appreciate an option where if we were going to look at telephone and internet, where we keep the polls open, but you know, I know there's only so much budget to go around. I did have one more. Oh, just this is kind of curiosity. There was a comment about making voting mandatory. Do we have that kind of power?
I know I don't.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Someday. Okay, that's it for me for now. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Kushner, you're up, and then Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was similar. When you look at page 4, you see that a very large proportion of communities have telephone voting and internet voting. And if internet is so problematic, are they changing away from internet voting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There are some municipalities that are pivoting away from internet voting due to some challenges that they experienced in 2018.
Okay, and a second question with mail voting, is there not a possibility of fraud, people selling their voting cards to others?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when someone does request a vote by mail kit, they do have to sign a voter declaration that they are who they say they are. They need to provide identification. And if we were to receive, when we receive the ballots back, they are scanned off in our online portal, so the elector can see when the ballot is actually received. And ballots would be considered rejected if the voter's name has already been struck off the voters list as having voted. We would be marking that outer envelope that we have received back, and it would be filed accordingly.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand. So I would receive a kit to vote by mail, and why could I not pass that on to someone else?
It would, through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be a violation under the Municipal Elections Act if someone were to do that.
Okay, and my next question is why an additional $50,000? Would the voting kit be sent out with the normal notification or what? Or would you have to request it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you would have to, the elector would have to request to receive a vote by mail kit in advance.
Okay, thank you. That it's a very well-researched report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Del Vecchio. So, I mean, you've gone through this whole process, and the bottom line from the clerk's position, that you folks are members of the executive branch, the elected representatives are part of the legislative branch, and we have a stake in the elections, whereas you're operating as independent and impartial arbiters of the vote. I guess that's a bit of a lobball question, but yeah, that's the position that you're in. You're here to safeguard the integrity and make sure that the vote is done in a fair way and that which people can put trust in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. And the clerk, as the returning officer, does have a role under the Municipal Elections Act to ensure that the integrity of the act is upheld through all of our processes and procedures.
Okay, thank you very much. The voters list, or the list of electors, has been in the past notoriously out of date and inaccurate. And those of us who ran through a few different campaigns have submitted information, and sometimes they don't even get updated from one election to the next election 4 years later. Is there going to be
Maybe he's just thinking. He's mid-thought. No, he's froze. So I think the genesis of the question is there any changes to the way the voters list is being tabulated?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the answer to that would be, for 2022, there are no changes to the way the voters list is going to be delivered. It will still be delivered to us by MPAC. However, for 2026, Elections Ontario is taking over the responsibility for the voters list. They have a lot more data at their fingertips and at their disposal that they could use to have to develop a more accurate data set for us to follow. So we look forward to that positive change in 2026.
Sorry, my internet just conked out as you were speaking, but I think I got the gist of what you said. Anyway, I agree that it's a great report, and I'm glad you're erring on the side of safety. We've heard from, we witnessed what happened in the United States in terms of alleged election fraud with mail-in votes, but there really didn't seem to be that there was really any issues. So, and Councillor Kushner's asked the questions with the mail-in vote. So I'm confident with what you have presented to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other further questions, the voters list is, I think, the key to increasing voter turnout. MPAC is still currently the provider of the list, and because MPAC is an assessment-based company that looks at property, it makes it very difficult for people who live in apartment buildings, for seniors who live in the older adult care facilities to actually get their voting cards, because it's a big challenge. To this day, I cannot understand why Elections Ontario is not the current provider of the elections list, because it would make it much more accurate. And I will say publicly that after the last election, I lost count on how many people from apartment buildings called and said they didn't even get a notification for the election. So I don't know, to the clerk, I don't know how we can change that for 2022, because when you look at the federal and provincial voter turnouts, it's in the 50 to 60% range, I think. I'm no expert, but it's between 50 and 60%. Ours is around 30, 35% locally in municipal elections. And I believe it's all tied to the fact that not enough people are being notified that they actually can vote in a municipal election. So I'll turn it over to the clerk just for a brief comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, we have implemented a system in our office where we now are updating the voters list pretty much daily. So we're taking people off, putting people on. We now have the ability, the clerk has the ability to use internal documents, tax notices, water bills, things like that. So we're trying to update the list that way to try and perfect it before, so that we have more people on. The other thing that we are doing, or we did in the last election, was we followed up with our planning department when apartment buildings went up, when development places went up, and followed up with land registry to try and get more people on. We're doing the best we can, but there's certain documentation we do not have. So in terms of election turnout, what we've noted and what we know in our research is that the candidates who and the platforms bring out the numbers in terms of the percentage of votes. That's what we keep being told by our AMCTO folks.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, I'll need a motion for the staff recommendation. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Porter. And I'll look to the clerk for the call to the vote.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, I'm sorry. I just had a comment about the report, but it wasn't a question to staff.
Okay.
Thank you. While I completely appreciate all the comments that are made in this document that were just left in the survey, I think we have a responsibility that when someone is making completely false and inaccurate comments, if you will, in the comments, maybe we need a footnote. In particular, I'm talking about page 43 of 45 of the document, talking about the U.S. election was stolen partially by mail-in ballots and was definitely stolen due to less stringent election security. That's completely false. And I think given the amount of inaccurate information that is circulating in conspiracy theorists and other things that we're seeing on the internet, maybe we need to just have a note, because this is a public document. I don't want people to think that this is accurate in any way, or that mail-in ballots could be similarly, I don't know what the word would be, but that this would happen here in our city. So thank you.
It's a great point, Councillor. I'll look to the clerk because I do think there should be an opportunity where people shouldn't have free will to comment and put inaccurate information on public documents. So if there's a way that we can at least footnote it, would you like to provide comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly can add some sort of a disclaimer when we post the report. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I would have liked to see us include internet voting this time around. I just want to sort of explain why that of those hundreds of municipalities that do it, 91% would recommend doing it again, that the internet voting in our own survey had higher preference than the mail-in voting and scored higher for understanding of how internet voting works as opposed to mail-in voting. 70% of people said they were likely to vote by internet versus only 33% said they were likely to vote by mail. Even the security issues were considered close in that survey. I think it was about 53% to 48%. So I understand there are some concerns about the voting list, but I don't think that should stop us. I understand there might not be really explicit proof that it improves voter turnout. That's just really hard to believe. I think when we give people more options, we would see higher voter turnout. So I'm going to vote against the staff recommendation because I would have preferred to see internet voting included now instead of waiting 4 years. I think that is where we are going. I think it's funny we're finally adopting mail-in voting, which seems like a sort of old-timey way of doing it, and I think we should be getting ahead of the curve on this rather than waiting. So that's why I'm voting against this.
Okay, any other comments about it? Councillor Kushner?
Yeah, quick question. What's the status of the region in this voting process?
Look to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we run the election for the region. So basically we get a note to say we run the election for them. So whatever we do, they do.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other further questions, I'll call the vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes?
Councillor Miller.
No.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Is Councillor Harris here? Okay. And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, 9.2, Community Recreation Cultural Services. This is being moved by Councillor Littleton, seconded by Councillor Porter. And I'll look to Councillor Littleton to speak on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very excited that this is before us. We passed a motion about a year ago to strike this task force, and so I really want to thank staff. I know they have a lot of work to do, but that it's before us now, we can get moving on it and get people in place who want to work on this project. I'm excited. Councillor Miller will be working on this, as the terms of reference are for both the Meriton Ward councillors, and I believe there are 2 councillors who have put their names forward. I look forward to working with them as well. And this is just a great thing for our community, and I think it's really going to draw a lot of interest, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Any other comments? So we do have 2 individuals who have expressed interest in addition to Councillor Littleton and Councillor Miller. We have Councillor Garcia and Councillor Porter, who are also expressed interest. So those are the 2 that are standing for appointment. I don't see any other names stand for an appointment here. And so we'll have a motion that is approving the terms of reference, and that the 2 councillors who have put their name forward, Councillor Garcia and Councillor Porter, be appointed to the 2029 Historic Welland Canals Task Force, which sounds very exciting. And it's moved by, we already got our mover and a seconder, so I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
A hearty and a historic yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right. So we now move into motions, and we have Councillor Garcia, you're up with 10.1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read that if I may. It's interesting that we had that presentation from the region's transportation department last council meeting, so this is quite appropriate. So whereas the Niagara region is planning a reconstruction of Regional Road 87, which includes Main Street, Locke Street, and Lakeport Road in Port Lucie, and whereas the council approved heritage guidelines for the Port Lucie Heritage District, identified the existing mature street trees with large canopies on Main Street as a heritage feature that should be maintained where possible during road reconstruction and or utility works, yet many of these trees have been cut down since the Heritage District was approved in 2003. And whereas currently when a large mature tree requires removal, the Niagara region will not replant a tree species that will grow to have a large canopy if it isn't the same location as overhead utilities. Rather, they would plant smaller ornamental tree species. And whereas if the utilities were buried, when other mature trees along Main Street require removal, they could be replaced with similar species that will grow to provide a similar canopy and help retain and enhance these heritage attributes. And whereas once the required environmental assessment prior to reconstruction is completed, the Niagara region will begin transitioning to detailed design and implementation construction, and the Niagara region and their consultant will need to consult with, and liaise with the various utility companies to discuss existing infrastructure, potential conflicts, and other impacts. And whereas Port Lucie is one of the most visited areas of our city and region, and it will be one of the sites for the 2022 Canada Games, the site for the 2024 World Rowing Championships, plus the site of annual regattas which attract thousands of visitors. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council urge the Niagara region to work with the utilities involved to consider burying the utility lines as part of the reconstruction within the Heritage District in order to help beautify Port Lucie and prevent and enhance what is left of the tree canopy. So I would just make a couple of comments on that, Mr. Mayor, that as I said, the region transportation department did present to us at the last meeting, and we asked that specific question, I believe Councilor Williams or myself, regarding burying of utilities, and they said they will consider it based on requests from the municipalities. So we're asking that we request that they consider it, that they work with the utilities involved, and I believe my understanding is it will be mostly Electra, and I know Electra, just like with the tree at City Hall, they've been very, very responsive in supporting local causes. And anything that we can do for that canopy, I think most of you who have lived here for a while will remember a day when Main Street was just like a tunnel. We had that beautiful canopy that overhanging Main Street, and so many of these trees have had to be cut down because they were perhaps old or in danger. So I'm hoping that the region will consider this. The environmental assessment has in fact been completed, but as they told us at the last council meeting, the work will not actually start now until 2025 because of the Canada 22 games and the 2024 World Championships. So there's lots of time for them to discuss this with the utilities and look at it in their planning, and hopefully they will come up with a good plan that will allow us to do this. And I will add that other municipalities are doing this, and I know Niagara-on-the-Lake has a program where they're burying a lot of their utilities as well. So thank you, and I hope everyone on council will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Garcia's motion is asking for consideration to look at this. It's not asking for a definitive answer or commitment on this, but I think the benefit will be is that we'll get a better sense of what it will cost, what the incremental costs are to bury infrastructure. As well, I hope that they include in this the financial long-term benefits of having the utilities buried, as well as the environmental benefits of what they will be. To me, this is a starting out point. Various people have asked for this on other stretches of roadway. I think we need to be strategic, and I think there's places where burying the wires will make sense, and not just in Port Dalhousie, but across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a comment. I fully support this, but I just want to recommend to either staff or the ward councillors, if there are sections of Boulevard along Main Street that currently don't have any trees, it might be a good idea to do a bit of a canvassing effort or to start planting some. We've gone through the experience of losing some really old mature trees on Woodland, and there are definitely lots of spots in other areas along the boulevard where we could have had plantings. So just thinking in terms of regrowth, sometimes the trees do get damaged during construction and they do have to be taken down, but you might want to start planting some of them now so that you're not losing, just in case you have to lose a bunch of trees. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to either the Director of Engineering or Director Douglas. I'll just preface my question with a comment. I know that we looked at this at the Facer District to bury the utility lines and the cable lines, and it was about a $7 million ask. So I'll support the request because it's correspondence, but can either of the directors comment on the many millions of dollars it would cost to execute this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, burying hydro utilities is an expensive venture. We've looked at it in a few situations. It is something that is costly and that the city would have to allocate funds for. However, asking the question of Electra is a starting point. Sometimes it could be coordinated with other infrastructure works that Electra may have planned for that area. So I don't think there's any harm in asking and looking into it to determine the cost, but it is a very costly venture to try to bury utility lines.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. The only question I have to the mover is when you talk about similar canopy, a good tree canopy management moving forward is making sure that there is a spread of species along along a street, so that if there was a disease or if there was a compromise of one species, that there will be others that won't be impacted by it. So just want to make sure that the expectation is it's not going to be the same trees being planted down Main Street that will follow the current St. Catharines model, which is creating a wide diversity of species down a streetway, which is better for tree canopy management.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I agree. The only point I would make is it's important that the trees that are planted are trees that can provide a canopy. I think we tend to, as I said in the motion, plant ornamental trees that are only going to grow a few feet just so that they're not going to interfere. And of course, they will never help the canopy, but I'm all for diversity on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, look to the clerk. Call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes?
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried unanimously.
All right, 10.2 National Child Care Program. Turning over to Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Littleton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I want to read out the motion. Whereas the province of Ontario has the most expensive childcare in the country, presenting a financial hardship for many families and a barrier for women's full economic participation, and whereas the $34 billion early learning and childcare spending commitment announced this year by the federal government will bring transformative change to childcare by lowering parent fees and expanding the supply of regulated not-for-profit and public childcare in this country. And whereas the federal government has already reached childcare agreements with BC, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Yukon, PEI, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Quebec, and today, Alberta, whereas the provisions of each agreement vary to some degree, but the majority of the jurisdictions have agreed to use the federal funds to lower parent fees by 50% by the end of 2022 to $10 a day by 2025 to 2026 or sooner, improve the wages and working conditions of early childhood educators, publicly fund the expansion of not-for-profit and public childcare. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of St. Catharines requests that the provincial government take the necessary steps to work with the federal government on a bilateral agreement to ensure that the new National Child Care Program be made available to Ontarians and that it focuses on increased access, affordability, quality, responsiveness, all of which are essential to the COVID-19 pandemic response and beyond. Be it further resolved that staff actively monitor federal developments, engage in provincial and regional discussions, and staff have emailed me today about this, so I really appreciate the updates. And be it further resolved that City Council request that the City Clerk circulate Council's decisions to other municipalities in Ontario, the Ontario Municipal Social Services Association, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So I'm not sure if my male counterparts get emails about childcare, but as a female city councillor, I do sometimes get desperate emails and Facebook messages from women and parents who are really struggling to find affordable childcare or adequate childcare. I had one recently a couple weeks ago. She was desperate to find childcare at a certain time in the morning, and she was afraid she was going to have to quit her job because she didn't have family around. In my own circumstances, our family probably paid about $60,000 when my children were little into childcare because we didn't have family around or help. And during the pandemic, this became a crisis. Childcare is infrastructure, and it's necessary. Canadians incur some of the highest childcare costs in the world, according to the OECD. And when the government provides affordable, accessible childcare to those who need it most, it offers a huge societal benefit. And we do reap rewards in terms of women going back to work, contributing to the economy, being able to go back to school, and being able to get promoted and getting additional training. They end up paying more taxes and contributing money into the economy. So people have looked at this. There's been studies all over that you can find that argue that there will be enormous benefits to taking this on, including 200,000 jobs in regulated childcare centers, 80,000 jobs in construction to build the additional spaces, increases to our GDP to the tune of between $18 billion is where it starts, into $20 billion, generating an additional $20 million in tax revenues. And it creates space for up to 700,000 women to join the paid labor force. So Ontario is one of the last provinces to sign on to this agreement, which is an historic agreement and something that many of us have been begging for years. So I think on behalf of a lot of families, I think that they would appreciate our council sending this message to the provincial government and asking them to follow suit and sign on, just as the government of Alberta has done today. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I'll turn it over to Councillor Littleton as the seconder.
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Porter for bringing this forward. I think, just until we have fully funded childcare or affordable childcare in this country, we will not have equality. It is just that simple. And I think that the Ontario government is a disgrace. They haven't come to the table and got this ironed out yet, because so many people, so many families are relying on this. I had to make the decision when I had kids to go part-time working. I like to work. I would rather have continued to work full-time, but it didn't make any sense financially because I would have just been paying all the wages into childcare. So I worked part-time. And for a lot of women, that derails their careers. It makes it harder to catch up once they want to go back in the workforce, and that's just not fair. So thank you very much for bringing the motion forward. I'm proud to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am fully supportive of this motion. The latest piece in the paper that I read this afternoon said that the provincial government hasn't even made a proposal to the federal government about this. I mean, there's no reason to delay this. The money is there. Not that many years ago, we had our three boys were little, and daycare was an issue for us as well. And it really, there's just absolutely no reason that they're not acting on this. The federal government has made the money available. They put the offer out there, and it's time for the province to do their part. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along the same lines as what Councillor Williamson just said, pardon me, I'm fully supportive, but perhaps through you to the mover, does she have an update on what the status is of Ontario? Because I do read conflicting reports as to whether our province is indeed negotiating or proposing something to the federal government. Or I believe I heard MPP Horvath saying this afternoon that they haven't even discussed anything with the Fed. So I'm not sure if the mover has any kind of an update on that and what's really happening.
They haven't signed the agreement yet. I think that's what matters at this point, and several other provinces have been at the table. I haven't been talking to anybody at Queen's Park. I'm sure we've asked our staff in this motion to inform us of any developments, and I think that we could probably ask for a memo from staff at some point, but I don't have the answer to what stage they're at in negotiations. I'm really not sure that they are negotiating at this point.
Thank you. And when you say, through you, Mr. Mayor, that they haven't signed the agreement, is it a prerequisite that they have an actual detailed agreement before they sign on to it, or could they sign on to it and then finalize the details?
Okay.
Is this a question to me? We're just asking the government to sign an agreement. In other cases, yes, they've sat at the table and they've had to negotiate. I'm making the same assumptions that there would be obviously negotiation. Every province is different and has a different type of childcare agreements. Quebec, for example, already has some kind of better childcare program, so their agreement is going to be different than Alberta's, which would be different from Ontario. We're just asking the government to work together with the federal government to sign the agreement.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Porter. I don't see any further questions. I got Councillor Kushner and Councillor Miller.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 5 o'clock news today did indicate that Premier Ford said that he was waiting to negotiate a better deal. So to me, it's inevitable, but I fully support the motion, but I have some concern with paragraph 2. We talk about our staff being overworked, and yet we want them to monitor the developments. What's the purpose of that? If we want to monitor the developments, we have access to our provincial and federal colleagues.
So I think I don't want to speak on behalf of Councillor Porter, but we do have a government relations person who's working for the City of St. Catharines, and one of the jobs is to monitor the direction of council on both provincial and federal matters as well. So this will become part of the work plan, but I'll look to the CAO as I do not direct staff.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It would be the role of the government relations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I just wanted to say fully support Councillor Porter's motion and certainly agree with Councillor Littleton that it's embarrassing the provincial government's dragging its feet on this, though it should be noted the current federal party in power has been promising this for 30 years, so it certainly had its share of dragging its feet as well. And I can speak as someone whose children thankfully just turned 4 and 5 and are now in school, which has allowed me to resume full-time work as well. I would certainly never presume to know what it's like to be a professional woman. They face far greater challenges than I do, but this providing affordable and accessible childcare will make a significant difference, not just in our economy, but in people's health, their mental health, their physical health, and their ability to enjoy life. So hopefully we see this happen in a very, very speedy manner. And thanks again to Councillor Porter and Littleton for bringing it forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miller. Seeing no other further comments, the region has approved a similar motion. It wasn't as detailed as Councillor Porter, so I want to thank Councillor Porter for the detailed work here. So there is alignment with the regional council as well, and it's good to see that there's multiple municipalities that are raising this issue. So I'll turn it over to the clerk for the vote.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right. Next motion, Councillor Porter, do you have a comment on the next one that was on the agenda?
Thank you. City staff and I have received a message from OMERS, which I have not had a chance to review in relation to this motion. So I'm going to pull it just to give myself time to review the contents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Now we kind of a notice of motion, but we're going to get it onto the council agenda. It's 10.4, which is the relocation of the Labyrinth. And we need, Councillor Dodge, if you can introduce it, and then I'll ask for the to suspend the rules in accordance with the procedural bylaw to allow us to vote on it tonight. So, Councillor Dodge, if you want to introduce the motion, then we'll go through the procedural part of it.
So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Phillips that council suspend the rules in accordance with the procedural bylaw 2021-124, section M64, to allow the motion regarding the location of the Labyrinth project to be considered tonight.
Okay. And so no real discussion, I don't think, on this request. Councillor Dodge has been working with the Valhalla Group and the Kiwanis to secure a site for the Labyrinth. And as such, there was approval by the Kiwanis last week. So instead of waiting to the November 29th meeting, we can get it done today and allow staff to proceed forward. So if I can have that vote, and it needs to be unanimous in order for us to consider it tonight. And so everyone will have to vote in the affirmative. To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, so now I'll turn the floor back over to Councillor Dodge, who has a new motion being brought onto the floor regarding this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the Kiwanis Board, again, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Phillips, whereas the Kiwanis Board at their meeting held on August 11, 2021, approved funding for the Labyrinth project, and whereas Kiwanis requested that location of the Labyrinth be at the Fairview John Page Park, and whereas Council at its February 10, 2020 meeting approved that the Labyrinth be located at JC Park on Ontario Street, and therefore it be resolved that Council approve the new location for the Labyrinth project to be at Fairview John Page Park. And if I could just make a quick comment to that, Mr. Mayor, it's wonderful to see a new partner come on board with this, and I'm hoping that Council will support me in this move, and it's a great thing to be able to move the project further and to make it happen quicker, and I think that it's going to be a wonderful new location, and I think that it will be well received by everyone, and I'm thanking everyone for their support.
And if you can, Councillor Dodge, just for people who may not know what the Labyrinth's importance is, and I think you've been working with the organization, just give us a brief outline of that.
The Labyrinth is a place that people that, in many different stages of their life can go there and they can reflect on things. And there's a lot of people that have mental issues. Maybe that's not the proper word to use, but anyway, people that want to have a place to go where they can reflect on things, think about things that are happening in their life. Right now, the Valhalla Group, a lot of those people that do use it go there with their service animals so that they can reflect and feel better about their, environment around them and whatnot. So it's a great thing to do, and it's a nice place to go and reflect and think about things and have a nicer outlook on things once you leave there.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I just want to thank Councillor Dodge for her work on this and the group that's in the Kiwanis, of course. And I actually didn't know anything about Labyrinths until that presentation here. I've since gone to the one at Hyde Park, and actually I found one on a run in Muskoka when I was up in Bracebridge as well. So certainly as someone who has trouble working through mental health issues myself, I've found them very helpful. So certainly excited to see one here, and I think it's going to be great for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. And it's fitting that Remembrance Day was last week, and we have an opportunity to recognize this because the Valhalla Group works with veterans and members of first responders who are suffering through PTSD. So this is a great opportunity for us to recognize that as well, and recognize that members of the military suffer disproportionately in terms of the PTSD that is occurring through different work-related and commitments that they have. Councillor Williamson, and then Councillor Littleton, and then Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks as well to Councillor Dodge. And the meeting that we had with Kiwanis and senior staff, I think there's pretty much, I won't say unanimity, but there's pretty much consensus around the fact that it's going to be important for the setting of this labyrinth. It needs to have a good, solid green buffer around it. Hopefully part of an eco park, but at least a passive area that will give a bit of a protective, I don't know, a bit of a natural hug around the labyrinth. I think that would make it a lot more of a special place for people to go when they want to have some time just to think things through and be reflective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Littleton and Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Director of Recreation Services, what was the discussion for staff, or I guess what's the thought of staff moving it, since we did approve it to be in a different park?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The idea of putting the Labyrinth at JC actually was based on the discussions that we had with the Valhalla group. We were brainstorming as to potential locations where we could put it, and we identified JC as a more of a, I think as Councillor Williamson described it, a serene location. However, the Valhalla group actually first came to staff with the idea of putting the Labyrinth at Cushman Park. They had actually spray painted the ground at Cushman Park, and that was where they first wanted to do it. And so we wanted to make sure that if we were going to move it from JC to another location, that they would be involved in the discussion, and if they had any objections to it, that they could voice that. And they certainly have not had any objections to this idea. And so it's been positive all around, and we have, I think, a wonderful opportunity here with the Kiwanis as a partner in this endeavor. So all in all, the conversations have been positive.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just a little confused. So it was going to go on in JC Park, and then they spray painted a different park, and now everybody's in another park.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor. No, initially the Valhalla group was at Cushman. Right. And then they came to us and sought out different locations. And we had talked about other parks, other locations. We had recommended JC among other parks. And certainly Fairview was also on that list. But when, we see an opportunity in front of us for a potential partner, Fairview is centrally located. It is accessible by public transit. Certainly, we have a new hard surface path that's being installed there. So this will make access to the Labyrinth, we believe, to be far better than what it would be at JC.
Okay, and the location of the Labyrinth is being placed in the park. I just know that this park has been discussed. I'm not against this. Okay, so everybody, I just am getting the logistics here about it. I just want to understand that it won't be moved for future development of the park with other ideas. That's all where I'm going. Like, this is going to be placed, and any future improvements to that park or other things that might go in that park will not interfere with it. We're thinking forward, I guess, is what I'm asking here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly are. We are timing the visioning for Fairview Park to be Q1 of 2022. We can't move on this project until that time anyway because of the conditions in the ground. So we will certainly take that into account when we present the visioning process to the public. We'll make sure that the Labyrinth is already part of the park, so that we are thinking ahead, we're thinking forward, and including the Labyrinth as part of Fairview Park moving forward.
Thank you. And just final question, when we say, because again, this is just before us tonight, I haven't had a chance to make calls, but these are questions I would have done. Kiwanis being a partner means a financial partner?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And the intent is to have it installed by spring of 2022, which this will be installed by April is the target when the work would begin, and then it would be ready for 2022 of spring. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I give credit to Councillor Williamson and Garcia for not opposing having it moved from their ward to another ward, and I agree this is a better place for it. It'll have better access. To Mr. Christie, as far as the development of the park, the plan for the park, Are we going with a consultant to do that, or are we doing it in-house, and where are we with that right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our new community planner started with CRCS today. Today was her first day, so this will be her one of her top priorities. And while we do have some dollars allocated to this project, we're going to start with it in-house and see what we can get done. And but there are some dollars set aside for this as part of a previous year's budget.
I know Kiwanis has put forth an idea of an eco park. Councillor Williamson's idea of locating the Labyrinth within a serene green area. Is that basically, is it going to be a whole eco park, do you know, or is it going to be part of an eco park and other amenities, or we haven't got there yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't gotten there yet. We've only met with the Environmental Alliance and the Kiwanis Club once regarding that. So there's only a draft document that's out there. We haven't really talked about it at length, and the Labyrinth and the Eco Park idea are two different projects.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Seeing no other further questions, I'll call the vote on this one.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, any notice of motions for the next meeting? Not seeing anything. Oh, yeah, Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd just like to put a motion on the floor for some parking issues that we're having on Scott Street, and we'll have more details as we move forward, but this is as much as I can give you tonight.
Okay, placeholder for the November 29th meeting to the clerk. Parking issues being resolved. And any other notice of motion? We have report requests. Councillor Williamson, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We received correspondence from Marianne Murray over the weekend in regard to Regional Road 87 Lakeport Road. So I would request the staff report responding to the issues raised in her correspondence, including the legal questions that she has asked. I don't think that this is super time sensitive, since that project has been pushed out somewhat, but it would be nice maybe to get some clarity on some of those issues in a fairly timely fashion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williamson. Seeing no other report requests, vote on the reports to move forward as a request. All in favor? Okay, opposed? That's carried. We now have the committee and task force minutes. So we do have council to receive and file the minutes of the advisory committees of council. So that's just a general advisory minutes of council. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Townsend, second by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? That one is carried. Now we do have some amendments. Amendments to the terms of reference for the advisory committee of older adults. And this is simply to increase the committee number, one, to affect quorum so that they can achieve their quorum numbers more effectively, but also to provide some additional citizen members to the older adults committee, in addition to the representatives that are currently on there. So Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Kushner. All in favor if there's no questions. That's carried. And we move on to 13.3, which is the report request from the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee regarding calls to action in the wake of the London Islamophobic attack. This motion is on the schedule in front of us. Prior to approving this motion, we do have the equity and inclusion individual, Ms. McEwen, who is working with the call to action that we had received a couple of meetings ago. So we can have those come back as an additional sort of work tied to that. So this is really going to get Ms. McEwen to look at some additional things. So I need a mover and a seconder to this motion. Councillor Kushner, second by Councillor Miller. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that's carried. The next one is 13.4, report request from the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee regarding equity and employment. And in terms of this one, I'm going to turn it over to the CAO because there is work being done on employment equity, and so if he could provide some input on that, maybe we can amend the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've mentioned and noted in a few previous meetings, we are working on a employment policy, diversity and inclusivity policy. It would be my recommendation that once that policy is completed and the draft is done, then it would be provided to the committee for review.
So an amendment would be that when the employment equity policy is complete, that the policy be forwarded to the Anti-Racism Committee in addition to the Equity and Inclusion Committee so that they can provide input. Councillor Miller?
Just, there's 10 practices they're recommending here. Maybe the CAO, could you touch on, are we already looking at those for inclusion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we are effectively looking at that. We'll take some of the information and put it into the development of the policy. Just one note, it has been delayed a little bit due to the COVID pandemic and some of the issues that we're dealing from a human resource standpoint. So we're looking to get it into the 2022, completed in early 2022.
Then I guess, could I ask just that we direct staff to review these for possible inclusion? I understand that's practically what's happening anyway, but just so it doesn't seem like we're ignoring the committee and it's like, okay, we'll check in with you after and send it to you for review. They've made this request, so I think that would be a good starting point to at least request that staff review these as part of it. That can be direction to staff, I think.
Okay, that's good direction. Okay, so in terms of the motion is really the employment equity policy, when it's completed, to go back to the Anti-Racism Committee, and I would also say the Equity and Inclusion Committee, if you can add that, Evan, Equity and Inclusion Committee for input. That would be a good step that we can take through. So if you strike the first part, Evan, I need a mover and a seconder of this one. Councillor Kushner, second by Councillor Phillips. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried, and it's good to see work coming out of the different committees that we have. As well, we have another motion, which is, again, that staff prepare a report regarding the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee's recommendations on the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the missing and murdered women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ1A+ People National Action Plan. And we do have a social sustainability pillar. Now, who's on that? Councillor Phillips. So in terms of this motion, is there an opportunity to provide some further clarification of the pillar or the committee?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. What do you, as far as clarification?
Yeah, I don't know. It's this is a big report request, and there's work that is already being done, and we're looking to see what the expectations are of the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee in terms of the recommendations. So trying to get a sight line on that, and I don't know if the CAO...
Well, I guess I would suggest then that the staff responsible for this go back and talk to the chair of the, because I don't want to speak for him because I might get it wrong. And it would be better if our staff went back to him for exact clarification as to his expectations. It was discussed at our last social sustainability meeting. You were with us, or you weren't with us at the time, Councillor Sorrento, but Councillor Sorrento and Councillor Miller are also with me on that committee.
Okay, so can we have staff work with the committee and come back to council with a recommendation?
I think that would probably be best.
Okay, Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I don't think this is actually that big of a report that they're asking for. If you look at it, it's a few things asking for the federal government to do some things. It's including some links on the city website and publishing a couple statements. I'm not sure how much staff time we're really talking about in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, I'll go to the CAO.
But once again, as Councillor Miller said, it may not be, but as he indicated last time, we want to make sure that their expectations are covered. So contact those possible two committee chairs and Mr. Wesruden and Haley Bateman, and to get exact clarification of that. It was brought forth by Mr. Wesruden's committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe to Councillor Miller's point, it could potentially just be clarification from what the expectation is from the committee. I believe this was brought forward previous to Ms. McHugh actually joining the corp, so there is a little bit of some education just in terms of what the intent from the committee was specifically to this. So we can definitely bring that back.
Okay, so we're going to have the staff work with the committee chairs and then bring it back. So this is we'll refer this to a future meeting. Just a motion to refer. Opposed? Okay, carried. And then 13.6, which is staff prepare a report regarding the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee's recommendation on race hate incident response protocol. And where are we on this? Because I know staff have a protocol, but is it a approved policy or is it a working protocol?
Through Mr. Mayor, right now it's a working protocol. So anytime once notified, it's #1 priority for staff to address the issue, whether it's graffiti or some other element. But it's nothing that's necessarily codified. We do what we need to do.
Okay, so staff will work on this one. Okay, motion to approve this one, Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Dodge, and what we'll see is a policy come back that would establish a protocol based on the recommendations of the Anti-Racism Committee. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. No closed sessions. Reading of bylaws. That the bylaws listed in council agenda A through E. It says I. Why does it say I? What's I mean? It's like I want, like I? After H. After H? But, oh, he put it as I. All right. If you just put the I there, I can I'm not phonetically that challenged. Why would I say L if there's a dot on top of the I? Just make it a small I. Aye, sir. That the bylaws be listed on council agenda A through I be read a first time considered and passed. They be signed and executed by the mayor and city clerk. I'll have a motion to approve. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Sorrento. And I'll look to a recorded vote on this one because it's the bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Aye.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, motion to adjourn. And before we do that, the budget meeting is on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And so for councilors who are going to be in council, it's here for also a hybrid opportunity. And we're discussing the operating budget. So councilor, the budget chair will be in this seat and we'll be discussing everything operating. So we're getting closer to the finish line on the budget. And I just want to let the public know, but also thank the staff and council for the work they're doing up to date. So a motion to terminate. Councillor Phillips, all in favor? Carried.